Joe Rowling asked me to read this here today. Having seen Dan Radcliffe's screen test, I don't think Chris Columbus could have found a better Harry. I wish Dan, Emma, and Rupert the very best of luck and hope that they have as much fun acting the first year at Hogwarts as I had writing it.
I think I'm a tiny bit like Harry, because I'd like to have an owl.
Staring out at a room full of reporters on his very first day as Harry Potter, blinking at the popping flashbulbs and gamely fending off reporters' questions, there was no doubt about it. Daniel Radcliffe was in for the ride of his life. For 10 years, Daniel has lived the fantasy on the cloistered sets at Leavesden Studios and facing the frenzied excitement of fans from around the world. It's been a strange and wondrous and sometimes even unsettling journey. And the one person who can really identify with Daniel's incredible journey is J.K. Rowling herself, because she's lived it too. In 1990, she began writing her 7-book Harry Potter series with little expectation, and then watched it grow into a phenomenon unprecedented in the world of literature. And now, for the first time on camera, J.K. Rowling and Daniel Radcliffe will share their experiences over a decade of Harry Potter.
How are you?
Not bad at all. Did I just tread on you?
No, not at all. Please have a seat. Excellent. So, this is exciting.
Yes, it is exciting.
This is our chance to ask each other
all the things we've asked each other off camera, but now do it in front of
camera.
But
now do it in front of camera,
yeah.
absolutely. And I'm going to try and be much more profound and insightful than I ever have been off camera.
Go for it. I'm looking forward to this.
Okay. This is my chance where I realised that doing the interviewing is actually not an easy thing to do at all.
That's okay. We can swap. I can interview you.
Yeah. That would be brilliant. Okay, so I thought to begin at the beginning, how involved were you in the casting process, and how much do I have to thank you for? But do you remember working with Chris? Or?
Yeah, I was involved, not to the extent that I was sitting on auditions, but they were keeping me really fully informed. As you know, we found Rupert and Emma and they were perfect, and that was a done deal, and we still couldn't find you. Will you say how you were found? Well, it was just, it was amazing, really.
It was a bizarre kind of moment. Originally, what had happened was that David Heyman, the producer, knew my dad, because my dad had been a literary agent, and my dad had worked with David's mum. And so David sort of asked my dad if I would audition, and the original deal that we'd heard was going to be to do 6 films, and it was going to be done in America, and it was all sort of,
It was going to be done in America? No one ever told me that.
Well, obviously, maybe that's why it changed, because you probably put your foot down at some point, or they just went, Joe won't agree to that.
They know me quite well.
Which was good, to be honest. That would not been good. But I'm not somebody who particularly believes in fate and destiny and all those things, but my parents do. And so the final straw was the fact that I went to the theatre to see a production of Stones in His Pockets, and David Heyman and Steve Clovis, who adapted all but one of the books, happened to be sitting in the row in front.
You believe it?
And I was sat there for the whole time thinking, why is that man keep
staring
looking
at me?
This
is very creepy.
It was very creepy.
I need to phone someone.
It was very odd. And I remember at the interval, my mum and my dad both looking kind of quite intense about something. But you know, when as a kid you're aware that you're being purposely kept out of the loop, for your own good kind of thing. And I remember we went up the stairs and out of the theatre, and then sort of hid behind a pillar. I seem to remember that it's some absurd notion that David Heyman and Steve Clovis were going to chase after us, grab us.
And make you be a child actor.
And then there was some debate as to whether we would go back in for the second half, but I was really enjoying the play. Yeah, and so we went back in, and then the next day my mum and dad sort of went, oh, well, maybe it is the gods sort of trying to tell us something,
But there were a lot of strange coincidences. And then they called me and said, we think we've found him. And then the first time I ever saw you was on screen in my sitting room at home. Because they sent me a video of you. And the curious thing is, and I'm like you, I don't believe in fate and destiny.
Which is interesting because it comes up so much.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you make your own.
Yeah.
But so I saw you on that audition tape, and it was I don't think I've ever really told you that I found incredibly moving.
Oh, thank you so much.
And almost, I mean, it was incredibly moving. At that point, I didn't have a son.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So, and I phoned David up, and I said, he's great, he's fantastic. And I did say to David, it was like watching my son on screen. Because after all, Harry feels like this ghostly son that I've had in my life. But, you know, to be honest, you and Rupert and Emma are all too good looking, frankly. You are, you know, the characters were geeky, and you...
Did you know that was going to happen? Did you sort of think they might...
Idiot. I'm not an idiot.
Yeah.
I did, particularly when do you know what, it was really lucky I spoke to Emma first on the phone before I met her, because I fell absolutely in love with her. She said to me, I've only ever acted in school drama plays before, and God, oh my God, I'm so nervous, I can't believe I got the part. And then she spoke for like 60 seconds at least without drawing breath, and I just said, Emma, you're perfect. And then when I met her, and she was this very beautiful, which she still is, of course, beautiful girl, I just kind of had to go, okay, it's film, you know, deal with it. I'm going to still see my gawky, geeky, ugly duckling Hermione in my mind, but...
Do you think that in a way we shot ourselves in the foot with things like that for then Emma's reveal in the fourth film, where she comes downstairs and there is supposed to have been this transformation?
Well, exactly.
Because we're all looking going, well, she was already a beautiful girl.
Yeah, big deal. Now she's a beautiful girl in a beautiful dress.
Yes.
And putting her in Fair Isle sweaters in the first film didn't make her ugly. Not that Hermione in the books is ever ugly, but it was quite a big deal for me that I had written, you know, a strong female character who was primarily about brain, and that she chose to become a little more groomed and glamorous as you know, us geeks do at a certain point in our lives. But I accepted it. Emma's a great actress, and I loved her as a person. And I felt there were so many connections between her and Hermione that did it matter that she was beautiful? Come on.
But it was interesting you mentioned about that audition, because I was given a copy of my audition where I was... and it turns out, because neither me, Rupert and Emma could remember this, but it turns out we did all audition together once. There was a screen test
I didn't know that.
where they all tested us all at the same time. And I could hear Chris Columbus's voice off camera.
Hello, it's the German Harry. Time to leave. Be gone from the library, now. Cut. Great work, guys.
And I just remembered, God, he was brilliant. He was amazing with us. Like, I don't think anybody else could have got the enthusiasm out of those...
He's just the nicest guy in the world, isn't he?
Nicest guy in the world.
And a real family man. I remember meeting him and being... I don't know, where is not the right word, but obviously this is the person who's going to be taking my baby, and same way I felt when I met Steve Clovis, whom I absolutely adore as well. But, you know, first time you meet these people, and he was just such a nice guy, and the relief... both that my book would be in safe hands, but to be honestly, that you were all going to be in safe hands as well.
In England, it's different than in America. In America, they treat you first and foremost as a star and then as a child, whereas actually you should be treated as a kid first and then an actor second.
Do you think you had any idea that young of what you were really taking on?
Not really, because I wasn't even then fully aware of the scale of the phenomena at all. I mean, I'd had the first two read to me by my dad, who incidentally did a great basilisk voice.
Did he?
Yeah, fantastic back in the day. I did actually at one point.
I can actually imagine your dad doing that.
Yeah, my dad, I did actually suggest it to Chris Columbus, which my dad was completely mortified by. But no, I was, no, I don't think I could have ever had any, and even now, I don't actually think I have an understanding of how far it reaches, because it is a case of not being able to see the wood for the trees. You know, I'm so much in the middle of it that I actually can't see how far out it stretches. I
had exactly the same experience, although I think for a while I deliberately kept myself insulated from it. I didn't want to think about it. And when people would give me statistics, so many books sold or so many territories covered, and you just think, I just want it to be me and my desk. I don't... And you know, again, people will watch and think, oh, come on, you know, you could see the royalty checks coming in. I'm sure you noticed this.
Yes.
And absolutely, I knew it was. But there was a scariness and a pressure and sometimes a weirdness about and you know this and I know this, when people are obsessional about something, on the outer fringes, you will have, you know, strange things going on that you maybe don't want to focus on too much when you just want to write your book.
As you say, it's you with your desk. I'd rather be in my aircraft hanging outside Leavesden with the rest of the crew.
It's weird. So you couldn't have contemplated, because I can remember the first premiere, and you were shaking. Yeah, you were. Yeah. But it was. I don't think any of us knew what to expect, did we?
No, I don't think, because on Potter it's a very insular world to film, so that you just basically, you know, you go into work every day. There's a big perimeter fence around the studios. We are the only film at Leavesden, so normally you'd have interaction between different crews and things. Because
it feels very safe, doesn't it? I always felt that when I visited. It felt like family. Everyone knew everyone else's names.
What was lovely for us was that, from my point of view, and I speak for I think most of the set, in terms of your involvement, you were around a lot at the beginning and early on, and very, very involved. And then as you kind of saw that we weren't going massively off script,
absolutely. That's
kind of
completely right.
back,
completely right. Early on.
But was that hard or?
No, it was easy.
Okay.
And it was a relief.
Right.
I was around a lot earlier on. I wanted the Great Hall to look right. I wanted Diagon Alley to look right. You know, there were details that I saw so clearly in my mind. I knew I could help. I knew I genuinely could help, and I could help them make it right for the readers. And I felt a huge protectiveness, I suppose, and loyalty to the readership. Yeah. Once I knew you were up and running, and it was fine, it was a relief to say, right, there are the films, and I'm over here with the books, and that's fine. And I trust these people, and I did, and I do.
And that's wonderful.
And, you know, I think, and I have to say that it was, inevitably, you had to depart from the strict storyline of the books. The books are simply too long to make into very faithful films. And I can think of many places where it's worked just beautifully. And some things are just more filmic, and some things are more inherently novelistic. So I was always accepting of that. It didn't have to be a word-for-word transcription of my world, although some fans are that.
Yes, I mean, I do think
I'm not that scared.
that they kind of, no, you're not, which is wonderful. But I do sometimes think that, you know, if we did make a 6-hour Harry Potter film, there would be
an audience
there would be an audience,
and they would still be complaining that there were things that were wrong, and they would want the director's cut.
Yeah.
So let's not even go down that route.
So, is there anything, talking about things, you know, being cut out and things, is there anything that we've cut that you were a couple of things maybe that you were upset about that you thought could have been in, and is there anything that we put in that maybe weren't in the books that you thought, you know, because I always remember I remember something about Alfonso and the Dementors.
No, I was fine. I remember exactly what it was with Alfonso. Yeah. There was first of all, on the Dementor point, I thought he did those beautifully, and I loved the fact that they really created that visceral dislike. I loved what he did with the Dementors.
Cool.
What it was there was something in the script that Alfonso really wanted to get music into the film.
Right.
And he put the choir in, which I loved.
Yes.
But at one point, he had this rather bizarre scene where I think Flitwick was conducting, and there was this there were miniature people in an orchestra inside something, and you see, this is my geekiness. I said to him, but why? I know it's visually exciting, but part of what I think fans really enjoyed about the literary world was there was a logic that underpinned it. There was always a logic to the magic, however strange it became. And I know it's intriguing to go through the mouth of whatever it was and see these little people, but why have they done it? Yes. For you to film it, that's just what it feels like.
Yeah,
you know, normally with the magic, there is a point. So we had a bit of a discussion.
Yeah. Okay.
Sometimes I would dig my heels in on the funniest things. I'd be saying, change the costume, that's no problem. Yeah, I don't mind if that happens in that city instead of that city. And then all of a sudden I'd say, but they wouldn't do that spell. Why would they do that there? Yeah. So I think sometimes I confused people. But I also remember, right back into the beginning, when you were cast, I remember David Heyman calling me up and saying, we've tried green contact lenses. We can digitally alter his eye colour post-production. How important is it that his eyes are green?
That I will, thank you for.
And I said, the only really important thing is that his eyes look like his mother's eyes. So if you're casting Lily, there needs to be a resemblance, but they don't absolutely have to be green. Oh, thank Christ, he said. Because, were the contact lenses awful?
The contact lenses, there is a very small percentage of people apparently who have a very extreme reaction to contact lenses. and
Poor
I
thing.
was
I
one
would-
of them.
I feel
On
really
and on.
bad.
No, don't worry. It's 10 years ago. It's really fine.
Are you over it?
Yeah,
You've had your
I'm
therapy?
over it now.
Sorry.
But there was, because also the other thing that we didn't think was a particularly good sign early on was that the green eyes went down so badly. But then after I came up in these terrible spots after about a week. Like really, like, and I, then in my teen years did get bad acne, but I was 11 at the time.
You never
so it
looked
was-
like you had bad acne.
There is
Was that great makeup?
that was great makeup and some visual
Because
effects.
I've been walking around for years saying it's incredible none of them ever even got spots.
Are you joking? No, no.
I promise you, I kept
They're-
saying, how unlikely is that we managed to cast 3 kids who go through adolescence on screen, they always have perfect skin.
I think Rupert was the luckiest of the three of us. Rupert didn't have much. But me and Emma, well, particularly myself, got very, very spotty. But over that first 2
never
weeks,
knew.
it was brilliant because we put the glasses on and eventually we realised that I was allergic to them. I was actually allergic to the Harry Potter glasses because I had these 2 rings of whiteheads and spots had come up around my eyes. And it took us about a week to realise that it was actually the glasses. But it didn't, it was...
It's lucky neither of us believe in signs, isn't it?
Exactly, it really is lucky we don't believe in omens. But I also like that you sort of people selectively believe in omens, so that we probably just disregard that one
Yeah,
anyway.
exactly.
That would be
won't look at that one.
coincidence.
You were meant to be.
Yeah. I remember my first day was quite scary because I looked on the call sheet and it just said me, Emma, Rupert and Robbie Coltrane, because actually we were shooting the last scene of the film
But you
first.
love Robbie, though.
Yes, it's wonderful.
David Heyman said to me, if there's one actor that you really want for one of the parts, and I said Robbie for Hagrid,
really?
and I just kept saying it, and they talked about other people, and yeah, that was a bit of a deal breaker for me.
While we're on the topic of the other actors, Alan Rickman
Alan.
and my relationship with Alan since the 5th film has changed totally.
Has it?
And because on the 5th film I found him very, very intimidating.
He is scary.
And he is a scary guy.
just scary.
Before you sort of, and then I went and did Equus, and then we went out for dinner afterwards, and suddenly I found that Alan's actually hilarious.
He can be very, very funny.
Really funny and self-deprecating and kind of wonderful company, and who also was so supportive of me whenever I was going on stage. At one point, he cut short his holiday I think in Canada to come back early and see the show so he could talk to me
Listen,
about
I
it.
didn't know about
Like
that.
he
That's
does,
lovely.
he's amazing. Like he does things like that, and. But how much did he know originally? Because there was always been this thing of Alan knew something.
Alan really makes me laugh. Right, it's absolutely true. I told him really early on that Snape had been in love with Lily. That's why he hated James. That's why he projected this amount of dislike onto Harry. So he knew that.
And at what point?
Then I heard you told me
Yeah.
that he'd been saying in I don't know whether it was more than one scene, but you told me that he'd said, I just don't think Snape would do that,
Yeah.
given what I know.
Yeah.
And I
do
thought,
remember
Alan,
that.
are you really milking this now? If your camera angle's not good enough. No, I really feel at this point Snape would be centre stage in The Good Life because of what I know. So then do you remember we were talking about, I said, well, let's just pretend I've told you loads of stuff. So anytime they try and make you, but you wouldn't go for it.
No, I didn't.
Very
They were-
principled of you.
They were trying to get me the other day. They're all trying to get me to get a bit pissy about stuff because they wanted to go home early. I've still not gone into the crew pressures yet.
It was funny about sort of telling things because people used to say to me all the time, have you told the actors? Have you told the actors what
And I
happens?
don't think we wanted to know.
And you didn't want to know. And I don't think anyone really believed that. But I think partly, I know that you started winding people up and saying that I had told you stuff, but that was on set.
Yeah.
I mean, among the cast, wasn't
Yeah.
it? And then you got more than you bargained for because then you got a taste of what it's like to be me, didn't you?
Yes, then I got everyone coming up, and it was.
So you had to back
so
off
I really
from
had to
that
kind of admit that I
position.
actually know nothing all along. It was the one night you came and saw Equus was also
Just
the
the
night
night
that
they
somebody threw
threw
an
the-
owl at a stage.
An owl onto stage. And
Stuff
you said to me,
not real.
that's the only time that's happened. I said, well, I threw it.
Yes.
Coincidence.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. And afterwards, I remember I turned around to you and said,
Do I die?
Go on.
I've got to ask.
"Go on, do I die?" And you very cryptically sort of paused for a moment.
Said
and
you
then
get a
said,
death scene.
You get a death scene, which was sort of
And I saw you double take. You knew.
yeah.
You said,
Yeah. At that point, I was kind of like, okay, I sort of vaguely have some idea what's going on.
and Neil, my husband, afterwards said, what did Dan ask you when he lent into you? I said, he asked if he's going to die. What did you tell him? I said, I'm not telling you.
So did Neil not even know? Really? But so because I remember hearing a story at one point about, you killing off a character and becoming very upset about it. And would you not be able to talk to him about that kind of stuff?
I think I told him in advance of Dumbledore. Okay. But he didn't know whether Harry was going to make it. No one knew.
Really? You really were living with that weight then?
It's funny because Matthew, I remember seeing Matthew at the premiere for...
He's brilliant, isn't he?
He's brilliant.
Yeah.
And there's another example. You know, they cast what they think is this plain-looking kid, and he grows up to be this kind of rock god.
And also one of the coolest, most hard-working guys on that set.
Yeah. I met him at the premiere for Half-Blood Prince, and I said, there's some great stuff for Neville in, and he went, I don't want to know! All right, sorry, just trying to liven up the conversation. There you are.
But you can normally rely on me and Matt for understatement.
He was pretty forceful.
In the books, obviously, it's how much were your school days kind of influential on the kind of not obviously in the magic, but in the
no, not at all. I went to a comprehensive.
All right, okay.
So it was.
Cool. So all these kids you've inspired to go off to boarding schools.
Yeah, God, which was the very last thing I wanted to do. Actually, it certainly wasn't pro boarding school. It's simply logistics. There's a logic underpinning the world, and if you are a part of society who's living in secret, and you want to gather together a large number of your children and teach them potentially dangerous and explosive things that could expose the whole society, you are going to do that in an isolated place, and you probably are going to have them board there. Yeah. It was just logistics. Yeah. But of course, there is an appeal to young people, and there was to me the idea of just being together with young people and being divested of your parents. Yeah. I think that's quite appealing. Yeah. It's much more interesting to write about if you're talking about kids with kids, and the authority not being parental figures. It just allows them much more leeway. Yeah. So that's why it was. But it was no kind of a yen to recreate any sort of 1940s boarding school in the slightest. I know this for a fact, and I'm afraid people will just have to take my word on this, because after all, I have met thousands of the kids who've read these books. Children from virtually every walk of life would like to go to Hogwarts.
Oh, yes, absolutely. I still would.
Well, you know, it's an exciting place. It's spooky. It's mysterious. They get rid of their parents. Yeah. They get to have feasts every day. It's in some ways a fantasy. It's a dark fantasy because there are things there that are frightening. Yeah. But you could have quite a nice life at Hogwarts as long as you kept your head down.
And weren't friends with
friends with Harry Potter, who kills everything he touches.
Moved to Midsummer. Why'd you go and live there? It's a terrible idea.
Don't be friends with Harry.
Yeah, because in a way, because what I like about Harry as a character is that one of the things that sort of marks him is that so many of his relationships and so many of his most important moments in his life have been to do with death. And, you know, for instance, his relationship with Cho Chang.
He's Typhoid Mary. Everyone who enters a room with Harry is going to cark it at some point.
Exactly. I mean, you don't hang out with him.
Well, exactly. Talk about an aura of doom. Yes, and that, of course, that was quite deliberate, and he's because the prism through which I view death in all its many forms.
Wow.
Of course, yes.
As the books went on, and you realised that actually suddenly it was getting a massive adult fan base as well. Did you then realise you could gear it more towards adults in showing that kind of stuff, or were you always going to confront kids kind of with that?
No, I always...
Anyway?
Well, it's a very good question, because clearly I never went into it expecting to pick up an adult fan base the way that I did. Having said that, I had said from the very first, I said to my first editor, Barry Cunningham, I want them to grow up, and it will get darker and it will get scarier. And I think you can see that happening right up till 4. I mean, obviously, after 4, things get very scary, but I always knew they would, because Voldemort's come back. Yeah. So some very nasty stuff happens. So I really went where my pen took me, and bad though it may sound to some people, I never really considered my readership in that way. I never sat down and thought, I just wrote what I wanted to write. Yeah. And things got darker and darker and darker, as you know, and...
So be it.
Yeah.
So coming on to Potter, how much then did you know from the beginning? Because there's it's almost become part of the legend of Harry Potter, that you knew all of it, and that and as these things do, they get out of hand. So the last chapter went from being written to being in a safe with an armed guard.
It's always rubbish. Always rubbish. It was nothing was ever locked away in that.
And did you fuel that at all, or?
Well, there was a degree of truth. I had very early on, but not the first day or anything, probably within the first year of writing, I wrote a sketch for what I thought the final chapter would be. So that's true. But it did change.
Okay.
Because at least one character was alive in that version of the character that subsequently I killed. So, you know, there were a
really?
couple of people.
Can we hear who?
Lupin was supposed to make it, and of course he didn't.
No.
Yeah.
Lupin's one of my saddest ones, I have to say.
me too.
That was pretty
Me
awful.
too. I hated killing them,
Yeah.
but they had to go. You've got the chip of ice in the heart of a writer, as Graham Greene
Jesus.
says.
Well, now, here's another thing, because was there ever a chance that one of the main... Because I was convinced that one of the main three had to buy it, eventually. One of them was
Funnily enough, I planned from the start that none of them would die. Okay. Then, midway through, which I think is a reflection of the fact that I wasn't in a very happy place, I started thinking I might polish one of them off. Out of sheer spite. There, now you definitely can't have him anymore.
Midway through the book or midway through the series?
Midway through the series, right. Yeah. But I think in my absolute heart of hearts, although I did seriously consider killing Ron.
Really?
Anyway, I can tell you exactly. It's a real relief to be able to talk about it all. It's fantastic.
It must be lovely, actually.
It's lovely. The truth is, I always knew, and this is from really early on, that I was working towards the point where Hagrid carried Harry, alive but supposedly dead, out of the forest, always. I knew where we were always working towards a final battle at Hogwarts. I knew that Harry would walk to his death. I planned the ghosts, for want of a better word, coming back, that they would walk with him into the forest. We would all believe he was walking to his death, and he would emerge in Hagrid's arms. So that's what always kept Hagrid safe, because Hagrid actually would have been a natural to kill in some ways, but because I always cleaved to this mental image of Hagrid being the one carrying Harry out, and that was so perfect for me, because it was Hagrid who came and took him into the world, and then Hagrid who would bring him back, and the onlookers would believe he was dead, you know, and just the physically Hagrid being so big and fatherly, and Harry being limp in his arms. So that's where we were always going. That's
amazing. It's interesting that something like that image actually kept Hagrid safe. I like that phrase. That it almost
that's
protected
exactly
him.
Hagrid was never in danger. And as I say, Lupin, when I first created Lupin, I had no intention of killing him. And then it was sort of borne in upon me that Lupin had to die, which is awful.
Yeah, I mean, that's a horrible
I knew he had to go, and the reason he had to go was, what if, ultimately, I mean, in the final book, you're looking at a war, aren't you? And what's horrific about war? Well, one of the horrific things is leaving children fatherless, motherless, and so on. And I just came to a point where I thought, I'm going to have to show that again, and the most powerful way of showing that is to kill parents that we know and to leave another baby boy is orphaned. You know, it happened in the first war, and Harry was that boy, and now it happens again. But you know, I gave him Harry as a godfather, and you hear about him in the epilogue, and you know that he's all right in as much as he can be.
Who was your favourite character to write for? To write dialogue for?
Dumbledore. Oh well, I loved writing for Ron. Yeah. I loved writing dialogue. I miss Dumbledore the most, because he came from I always feel like he came from somewhere back here. It felt quite automatic writing when I wrote Dumbledore. He was telling me things I needed to hear sometimes.
Oh, really?
I really liked that, yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so I miss him.
You know, to people watching this, there is a very cynical way to watch this. The way we're talking about these characters, if they are real people, and people, I think, just need to understand that for you, it's been pretty much 20 years with these characters at this point.
Yeah, 20 years, yeah.
You know, and for me, 10. So you do get not just attached to the actors who I play them, but the notion of them as the principles of those characters.
And a very ongoing relationship with them, and thinking about them as though they're real people. And just living with them, they're in your life. They're in your life the way real people are.
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask about, I do feel I have some duty on a personal level as well, because I've always had my own suspicions about this. Dumbledore being gay...
You were going to ask something completely. Yeah, go on.
Dumbledore being gay.
Yeah.
Well, was that something that was just thrown out for the American press to get them stirred up a bit? No.
Though it did.
No, it did, which is obviously was very funny. But
but I found people's reaction to that really interesting, and I'll tell you why. By the time that I said that, I had been working on these characters for 17 years. Now, not many writers have ever been with the same set of characters for that long, so I feel I can sort of speak for all of us who have to say it becomes a very intense experience, and inevitably you are going to know things about characters, and I'm characters in the plural, that are not in some cases will be relevant, and you'll think, oh yeah, this is the moment that becomes relevant, and I will say that or show that. Right. For example, Professor McGonagall, I had a whole history worked out for her that I thought at some point would become relevant, that she'd had a love affair with a muggle, and that she'd had this quite tortured past, and she ended up being this celibate elderly teacher. Never became relevant, never happened. And as time went on and I got to know Dumbledore, but this is before the publication of Philosopher's Stone, so bear in mind, at this point, I've been with him for 7 years, I knew he was gay. I just knew he was gay.
Okay.
And to me, it was not a big deal. This is a very old man who has a very terrible job to do, and his gayness is not really...
Part of it.
It's not really relevant. Very relevant to him as a character, because I always saw him as a very lonely character. And I think that there is, in fact, a hint of it in 7, because the relationship he has with Grindelwald, he fell very hard for this boy. He's awfully trusting of this good-looking young man when he shows up. And don't you think it was perfect that Dumbledore, who is always the great champion of love, Harry, love will save us, love, his one great experience of love was utterly tragic. Yeah. It was with someone who was dangerous and demonic.
Yeah.
And so, you know, and